Welcome to today's Global Connections program. I'm Bill Miller. Today, we're going to take a look at the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and some of the really unique activities that are taking place to help achieve these goals and to raise awareness of people to mobilize us to focus on them. My guest today is Mr. Amir Dossal. Amir Dossal is the president and CEO of the Global Partnerships Forum. He is a 25-year veteran of the United Nations and served as executive director of the United Nations Office for Partnerships until September 2010. Mr. Amir Dossal, welcome to today's Global Connections program.
Thank you, sir. An honor to be here. Thank you for inviting me to speak on this issue.
I appreciate you being with me today. We're going to have to move quickly. You've had so many accomplishments. I don't know where to start, but let's start at a basic level here. What is the Global Partnerships Forum? When was it started? Why did you start it?
Thank you. So as you rightly mentioned, I kind of what I call graduated from the UN in September 2010. I was very fortunate to have spent 25 years at the United Nations. And it became quite clear that at the end of the day, if you are to achieve any of the objectives and the goals of the United Nations, especially the Sustainable Development Goals, you can only do that through collaboration, through innovative partnerships. So we thought what we could do is create a platform for change makers, entrepreneurs, governments, private sector, civil society to come together and provide them a platform for collaboration and for building new forms of partnerships. The traditional methodology of saying, you give me funds and I'll implement the projects and so on, that's kind of passé. We need to pick on the expertise of all the people, all the sectors, and bring them together, pool them to accelerate progress. Because at the end of the day, it's the stakeholders on the ground who know better what the solutions are. So the Global Partnerships Forum focuses on that kind of a methodology, innovative collaboration.
It certainly is. It's very important. Well, let's focus. Again, there's so many ways we could go on this. Let's just talk about youth. What have you done with the Global Partnerships Forum to focus on youth, to assist youth?
We have to realize that the youth are key components of this. Often we tend to be prescriptive. We tend to say, we know what the solutions are. We'll tell you how you should go about it. But the reality is, I'm sorry to say, we don't know all the solutions. Or we might know the solutions, but the implementation can best be done through the engagement of young people. Young people are the future. We have to bring them in. We have to find what I call tech-based solutions, innovative solutions, where they can guide us to say, here's where I want to go. Can you help us? So that's where the Global Partnerships Forum gets engaged and brings young people in. COVID-19, by the way, created a huge challenge for young people, but it also brought in the entrepreneurial spirit of young people. And we found that many of them wanted to start new businesses, solve some of the social challenges emanating from COVID-19. So we've spent the last 2 years actually encouraging young people to do more and helping them set up their kind of new initiatives. And it is amazing how creative they are. If you recall, in the earlier days of the onset of COVID-19, there was a huge demand for PPE, the equipment and supplies and so on. And it was not easy to get quite a few of the things. And we found that through entrepreneurship, through creative purchasing and so on, it was much better to improve the supply chain. Now, solutions in the healthcare sector, education, environment, etc., needs innovation, needs entrepreneurship. And that's what we've been doing. We've been incubating some of these projects so that people can go out and take it to market at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. It's very important to provide that entrepreneurship and empower them, because it's really going to be their world, and how we leave it is going to be really the big challenge right now. I noticed on your list of accomplishments, shall we say, that you've been involved with the UNESCO launch, the Fit for Life program, the UN Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, What exactly is that program?
So this is kind of an offshoot of the impact of COVID. As you know, COVID can be addressed through different ways, but one of the first things we can do is to keep ourselves healthy. And that means prevention. And we found that over the years, young people are not exercising enough, their diets are not that good. If you see globally, there's an increase in obesity, diabetes, and so on, heart disease amongst young people. So the Fit for Life campaign is premised on the idea of regular exercise, better diet, and better nutrition. And UNESCO, as you pointed out, one of the key missions of UNESCO is provide better education. And better education, and if you have better health for young people, that enables them to learn better, have better IQ, and earn better. So the concept of Fit for Life is engaging young people in schools and colleges, get them to exercise more, be more healthy, and be more productive members of society. And we are so privileged as Global Partnerships Forum to be part of this initiative. We worked with UNESCO and their amazing team, actually, their sports section team, to bring in other partners as well, and to help them implement programs at the field level. You need to do research in terms of what the gaps are, but the bottom line is, if you introduce better diet and regular exercises for young people, it changes their health patterns dramatically, and long-term, it improves their longevity, if you like.
It certainly does. It certainly, no doubt about it. I might mention too that if our viewers would like more information on what we're talking about today, you can go to www.partnerships.org, which is the official website. So you were talking about the youth and, well, COVID-19, how can we get away from it?
Right.
And how it has it literally disrupted the world and a large number of our problems today. We look at the supply chain breakup. We look at, well, in some cases, we look at the climate crisis. We look at some of the conflicts taking place around the world. It's just COVID is a direct contributor to a lot of this, but you're also talking about sort of working from home and changing your lifestyle during this. Now, you're one of the founding commissioners of the Broadband Commission for Sustainable Development. What exactly is that? And how does it tie into this COVID challenge that we're still in right now?
Right. So it's quite interesting. When the Broadband Commission was established in 2010, ICTs, what we call information and communication technology, wasn't a major component of the SDGs. But if you step back for a second, every SDG or each of the 17 goals must have a tech component, because without new technology, you can't achieve them. Whether it's data gathering, whether it's implementation, whether it's delivery of services or delivery of products. Suddenly, when COVID-19 set in, people realized that young people couldn't go to school if they didn't have the right equipment, if they didn't have access to internet, for example. We are fortunate. We live in the West, where we are kind of automatically accustomed to having access to high-speed internet. But if you look at the poorer countries, they're struggling. Today, about 57 million children have not been able to attend schools worldwide, one way or another, because of lack of access to new technologies, lack of access to the internet, either the internet or they don't have the right equipment. And by the way, a stark statistic is, out of a population of 8 billion, 2.9 billion people in the world are unconnected. So it's quite remarkable. And in the Broadband Commission, its goal is to advocate for broadband access around the world. Get people to have that ability to log onto the internet, get access to information, learn about things, and improve their lives. And I've been privileged to be part of this very interesting program where we engage with the private sector, with governments, with civil society. It's a group of 50 commissioners, and the initiative was launched by the ITU, which is the International Telecommunication Union, and UNESCO. So it's a joint effort, and the interest continues to grow in this area, where we look at whether it's health. Within the health sector, we look at artificial intelligence. You know, in the early days of the pandemic, we didn't go to the doctor. We were afraid of going to the medical services. So we would call up, we'd ask for a phone conversation. Then they say, no, let's have a video conversation. So you talk to the doctor online. The way it's moving along, even though we need personal interaction, new technologies allow us to actually interact online.
It certainly does. It certainly does. It's very extremely important. Well, you're watching Global Connections Television, which is a privately funded, independently produced program. The opinions expressed on Global Connections are solely those of the moderator and his guest. We'd invite our viewers to go to our website at www.globalconnectionstelevision.com to view previous programs. Also, if you're involved with a PBS or community access television station, or perhaps an educational institution that has an intra-campus television hookup, or you have a podcast, or you just have a computer, you like our shows and you would like to share them, please feel free to do so. Global Connections Television is provided at no cost as a public service to help us better understand international issues and how they impact our lives. Today, we're taking a look at a wide range of international issues and how our lives have been disrupted to some degree because of COVID-19. My guest today is Mr. Amir Dossal. Mr. Amir Dossal is the president and CEO of the Global Partnerships Forum. We're talking about all of these issues and how we've been disrupted, and we've alluded to these SDGs. And of course, the SDGs, we're starting to hear more about them, and which are basically 17 very logical, quantifiable, measurable goals that were launched by the UN, well, really the UN General Assembly in 2015, and they kicked in 2016. They run over a 15-year period. And of course, they're trying to eliminate poverty, to eradicate hunger, to empower women, to promote quality education, combat climate change, and just on across the board. Now, with your group, you've got, as I recall, you mentioned that you have 5 SDG pillars. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah.
What are those?
Thank you for raising that. Actually, you know, when in 2015, when the goals were set in place, it became clear that the UN wanted to ensure that everybody was included in that process. So the 5 pillars, if I were to put it simply as a slogan, if I may, it's about creating peace and prosperity for people on the planet through partnerships. So peace, prosperity, planet for people through partnerships. And partnerships is, of course, I'm biased, is the golden thread. You cannot work in silos. And we really need to think of ways of how we have inclusivity for the people. We need to protect the planet. And I go back to your comment, Bill, climate is negatively impacting our planet all the time, every day. And we've been seeing the impact of climate change on the change in weather patterns around the world, actually, with the heat waves kicking in, where we never expected historical records to be broken. So that premise of the 5 Ps is about creating better livelihoods for future generations. It's our responsibility. We are caretakers of the planet. And it is not rocket science for us to say, how can we address some of these lacunas, these gaps which exist? And every one of us can contribute, even in a small way. You start at home by conserving electricity, you thinking of clean water, sharing your ideas online with others who don't have access to the right information, building these small partnerships, working with your local churches and religious institutions, and helping them feed the poor, but empowering them, trying to get them jobs and so on. So that's about creating sustainable livelihoods, and hence the Sustainable Development Goals.
It's interesting that the Sustainable Development Goals are now into about their 7th, 8th year or something like that. Well, more than that almost. But the interesting thing is that there's so many organizations that are actively supporting the Sustainable Development Goals. I can think of some like Rotary International is very involved in many of the goals. The 1.2 million Rotarians around the world. You have faith-based groups that are working towards achieving these goals. Private sector companies, literally tens of thousands of them, are working towards them. Yet the majority of the people around the world, Amir, and correct me if I'm wrong, still are not familiar with the concept of Sustainable Development Goals. Is that correct? And if it is, what can we do to help raise that visibility and promote that discussion?
Yeah, thank you for raising this. And I want to take you back to pre-SDG days when we had the Millennium Development Goals.
Right.
And I have to say this, that we struggled to share that idea with people. People would say, Millennium what? But then we have to explain it, go into details of the 8 goals in those days. What the UN did right was in 2014, 2013, started a kind of a engagement process with private sector civil society. So it brought in experts and also umbrella associations, bodies who could make a difference. So they contributed to the creation of these goals. But it's not enough. And I'm sorry to tell you that because of COVID-19, and we go back to COVID-19 each time, the SDGs have fallen behind. If you were to think of the SDGs as aspirational goals, we do want to change the dynamics for people who are underprivileged. But with COVID-19, that front level pressure of saying, I must include the SDGs in my business model has disappeared or reduced substantially. So we've fallen behind. We're now back to square one, back to 2015 in terms of achievement, partly because of, as I mentioned, a lack of technology access, people not being able to go to school properly, jobs not being available. We are now creating a kind of a huge haves and have-not society in the poorer countries. And even in the rich world, the people who live in the outbound areas don't have access to everything. And they're struggling with inflation today. Inflation that we've never seen happen for 40 years. All because of COVID-19, all because of supply chain challenges. And therefore, we need to figure out ways of addressing these gaps. And what we're recommending is find small initiatives which can help advance the process. Because SDGs don't belong to the UN. They don't belong to a government. SDGs belong to all of us. If we have to address poverty, and by the way, many of your listeners, many of your viewers are accustomed to giving money for charity through religious institutions. Many of them contribute to the challenges faced by people for hunger or education or health. What we're saying is create these programs which can create sustainability, if you like. So instead of just giving me medicine, help me with prevention. Instead of saying, you just give me a job, help me, educate me better. If you educate me better, I can keep that job and improve my job as well. So I can do well, and then in turn, I can give to others as well. So it's a positive cycle we need to create.
It certainly is, and it's paying it forward to a certain degree. And our viewers can go to Mr. Dossal's website at www.partnerships.org. And if you'd like more information also on the Sustainable Development Goals, you can Google them or go to www.un.org to get more information. But these are so important. And as you mentioned, we are losing ground, and especially in the climate area. And it's been pointed out, if we lose the planet, then we've lost the ball game. There's no planet B, as has often been said. So we have to preserve this planet. But let me ask you, Amir, in closing, I know you've gave a very impassioned statement to help mobilize people, to get people involved, and to make us aware of these problems, and to really do what we can do. Everybody has a role to play. It's not that you have to be the CEO of a particular corporation that's worldwide. Everybody has a role to play. But what else could we do to help us move this discussion forward and to have tangible, concrete accomplishments so that we can see that we are doing more to empower women? We're doing more to eliminate hunger, doing more to eliminate poverty, and certainly to reduce, or at least adapt to, this climate crisis, which is apparently getting worse and worse every day.
Right. That's a very good point, actually. I'm so glad you mentioned about women's empowerment, because at the end of the day, we tend to forget that women often tend to know the solutions better, and they actually know how to implement those solutions better. Within the UN family, I'm very pleased to say that I've been watching the development of bringing more women to the table. Secretary General Gutierrez, for example, has insisted about a 50-50 ratio, and the UN currently has amazing women leaders, including the Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed, who is leading the charge for the SDGs, coincidentally. She also chairs the UN Development Group to coordinate the implementation and the policy and implementation of these SDGs. So that's at the one policy level, high level. Individually, each one of us can contribute to the process, actually. I mentioned, I touched upon it a little bit. In the home, you can create a better environment by preserving electricity, not wasting electricity. You can address things like not wasting too much water. We are so used to running tap water, but in poorer countries, they don't have access to proper toilets, by the way. So if we can think of ways of how we can provide kind of better hygiene facilities for poor, and that doesn't require masses of investment. $10, $50, or $100 will change the lives of families in poorer countries. Think of solar energy, how that can be helpful. Think of how you can provide access to the internet. For example, we recently joined the ITU in a program called Partner to Connect. Partner to Connect is aimed at providing internet access to countries around the world. So especially in villages where they don't have internet access, we are now looking at giving them mobile internet access. We're now looking at putting in solar panels which can give them energy as well as internet.
There are many, many things we can do. And of course, as you mentioned so correctly, clean energy is the way to go. And it's not going to eliminate the jobs. People have talked about, well, we'll have all these unemployed coal miners and what have you. It will create more jobs in the future, and they will be better paying jobs, and it will be better for the environment. And we've got to move faster in that area. I'm so glad too that you mentioned Amina Mohammed, who now is the Deputy Secretary General at the United Nations, but she was on my show about 6 years ago talking about how the Sustainable Development Goals were developed. And so folks can go to the website at globalconnectionstelevision.com to see the program with her, and she goes into great depth. But Mr. Amir Dossal, President and CEO of the Global Partnerships Forum, I want to thank you so very much for a very interesting and a very informative program.
Thank you, sir. I'm honored to be here, and I wish you continued success. The way you're going about it, you're helping promote the SDGs. So we're very grateful.
Thank you. I'm Bill Miller. Thank you for joining us today on Global Connections Television.